We are joined now by Virginia Tech defensive coordinator Coach Marve. And you've got a unit, Coach, that between the year before last and last year, learned how to put the quarterback on the ground. You know, you finished second in the ACC in sacks last year. And I heard you talking about this, and I'm fascinated by this. You said, hey, we got there in 2022, but we couldn't finish those sacks. Like, how do you teach somebody to finish a sack?
Yeah, really good question. First of all, man, thank you guys for having me on. You know, I really
No problem.
respect what you do and what you stand for, and I appreciate you noticing, the work and the guys really seeing the fruits of their labor from a year ago. You know, the way you get better at football is by playing football, right? And so we drilled it incessantly, how to get to the quarterback, how to finish at the quarterback, and really not allow the moment to get too big for you. Just trusting your training, finishing where you need to finish, and knowing the personality of the quarterback that you're going against, right? Does he like to spin on the back shoulder? Is he a step-up guy? When he scrambles, does he look to run or does he look to throw the football? All those things are imperative, knowing your opponent going in, so that you have a really good plan of attack, and so you can react well.
So I was watching a lot of the plays from last season, and a lot of those sacks were a result of some interior pressure. Now, you've had to replace a lot of the interior, and you've done a lot of that through the transfer portal. How difficult is that when you're trying to blend guys, because your edge guys are guys that you're bringing back, your interior guys, you got a lot of transfers. How long does it take to get that chemistry right and figure out what the best combinations are?
The biggest thing, for us defensively, from a program standpoint, from a philosophy standpoint, it's about getting guys who want to play extremely hard, right? Within a system, within the structure of the defense, but playing like their hair is on fire. We're going to play a fair amount of guys up front because we want guys to have the opportunity to play fresh, put good stuff on tape, but ultimately who can get it done. And so that's what you can see with us. We got guys who are just going to go and play really hard and put their best stuff on tape, because we talk about, if this is something that you want to do, how much are you willing to sacrifice for your brother next to you, right? And a lot of that, equates to effort and what that looks like on tape. It shouldn't be a question about how hard you're playing. If you're changing speed, you need to show up in the end zone copy, and that's the bottom line. And so we do a lot as it relates to showing that, reiterating that concept and that mentality, and we hold the guys to that standard. It is what it is.
So when you guys started it, because last season, as the season went on, it felt like everything started to come together for you guys. And by the end of the season, it felt very different than it felt in the beginning. Could you guys feel that happening, as a coaching staff, as a team, as that was going on, as everything was sort of to click together?
As a coach, you really try not to zoom out, right, and look at the macro.
Yep.
You need to be extremely myopic, and the things that equate to success and equate to winning, right? As being detailed, that's holding each other accountable, staff and coaches. That's being intentional about what does work. Well, how can you get the guys to play as fast as possible, consistently? And what you want to do is make sure that the progress that you gain it continues, and it's sustainable, and that you understand to be successful, that progress is going to be incremental. Like, it's not going to happen overnight, particularly when you have 11 young men out at a time playing the guys that we play, and expect it to happen that quickly. So over the course of time, the guys were able to just continue to improve, and we kept challenging as coaches, challenging ourselves, challenging them, and it just got better as the year went on.
Well, and the other thing is this defense did grow up. I mean, you've got a bunch of guys who 2 years ago were playing as freshmen and redshirt freshmen. Like your cornerman, Sordelane, this is a guy who had to play a bunch as a freshman, and now here he goes into his junior year, and you're seeing him, in the first round of mock drafts for next year. How big is it just that some of these guys had to learn by playing?
You get better at football by playing football. I really believe that. I mean, this is a grown man sport. It's a lot of speed and mass moving at the same time. You get better by playing it. And so, throughout the course of the first season we were here and the course of the last season that we had, you did watch a lot of maturation show. You saw development happen on the field, both in positive ways and negative ways, right? Nobody played perfect. You learned from mistakes, and you grew with things that you did well. Us as coaches as well. And so, man, you're going to continue to see that. Football is an imperfect game played by imperfect people. But the standards that we set and how we hold each other accountable and how we decide to play and coach on a daily basis, that's going to be indicative of the level of success that we can have.
If you haven't downloaded the Prize Picks app yet, do it now. Sign up. Use the code Staples. You play $5, you get $50 instantly to play with. They have just started populating the board for week 1. And we talked about it yesterday. They had some of the Thursday games up. Now some of the Saturday games up. You've got Georgia Clemson squares. You've got Florida Miami squares. You got Texas A&M and Notre Dame squares. You also have a free square featuring Jalen Milroe, the Alabama quarterback. If he passes for half a yard on Saturday, if you've picked that square, you are going to win that square. Remember, with Prize Picks, you pick 2 or more squares. The more squares you pick, the higher your potential payout. They're saying if you pick Jalen Milroe with this square, you are going to win it as long as he throws for a yard, which he probably will. So you pick your free square, and then if you pick another square that hits, you're going to win. The question is, what's your square? Is it Cade Klubnik, more or less than 195.5 passing yards, 190.5 passing yards? Is it Graham Mertz against Miami, more or less than 249.5 passing yards? Cam Ward's on there too. That's the other quarterback in that Florida Miami game, 256.5 passing yards, more or less. So lots of different ways to play. Download the app, use the code Staples, play $5 to get $50 instantly. You talk about one of those guys that play with their hair on fire. APR, Antoine Powell-Ryland. Tell me a little bit about him, because he seems like he's one of those guys.
He absolutely is, right? And he's somebody that we push. I mean, he loves the game. He loves rushing the quarterback. And, he came back this year and we challenged him in certain areas, and he's worked his behind off to grow in those areas. And so, we're asking him to lead by his influence and by his play, how he approaches each day consistently. And we've been asking him to do it, and he's done it. And so we're excited to continue to push him and work.
So you guys open this week at Vanderbilt, and it's an interesting situation because they're bringing in a new quarterback in Diego Pavia. He was the New Mexico State quarterback last year. The viewers know who that is because we talked about him a bunch last year at New Mexico State. But for you, when you're watching a quarterback who you saw play for another team last year, going and joining a new team where you've got film of those players, but not necessarily that offense, that quarterback, how hard is it to prepare for something like that?
Yeah, first games are always challenging. I mean, I think there's some overlap between a first game and a bowl game, particularly one that's later in the bowl season, because there is a level of newness and novelty that you just have to plan for. And so when you look at a young man and the quarterbacks that they have on their roster, I have a tremendous amount of respect for them. You look at production, you look at ability. You talk about young men who know how to play football with grit, leadership. It jumps off the tape. Again, so we know we have a challenge in front of us, and we're excited.
So I have a question. I always wondered this about Virginia Tech, and you've now assumed the role of defensive coordinator, which of course Bud Foster held so well for so long, and he introduced the lunch pail, and Coach Beamer introduced the lunch pail to Virginia Tech. How do you decide which player gets to carry the lunch pail?
Yeah, I can't give away house secrets, but what I can tell you is that the guy who's carrying it, he is certainly emblematic of what we stand for and the ideals and values that we teach.
Is there actual snacks in there?
Can't give away house secrets, man.
All right, I had to ask. All right, so you're a guy who played at Vanderbilt. You played in a bunch of cool SEC stadiums. You worked at Florida State. You've worked, at different schools across the country.
Sure.
But what's it like when you get you get to Virginia Tech and you're out there and that Enter Sandman starts playing for the first time? What does that feel like?
Yeah, I can take you back even before the first game in 21. I guess it was 22. We had a spring game, excuse me. And you talk about the level of excitement, engagement, just buy-in and ownership that the community has for the program. I felt it at the spring ball game. And so you fast forward a couple of months just in 2022, and you go to the first home game and you feel the energy and the connection between the community and the program just on an entrance. I mean, it's very unique, very unique. unlike anywhere else I've ever been, quite frankly.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it's like, in the tunnel as you're getting ready and as all these people are just jumping up and down. Can you feel them? Can you hear them
Oh, you can hear
jumping
'em.
on top of you?
Oh yeah.
That's incredible. That is incredible. All right, so we mentioned you played at Vanderbilt.
Mhm.
Your senior year was 2010. That was the year that Bobby Johnson retired.
2011
And
last season.
2011. I'm sorry. Yes, that's right.
Mhm.
So Bobby Johnson retires and Robbie Caldwell takes over as head coach, which I was present for Robbie Caldwell's SEC Media Day
Were you? Okay.
press conference, which was maybe the greatest press conference of all time. Certainly the first press conference I've ever been involved in where a coach talked about being on the turkey insemination crew. But I got to ask you, what was that year like in terms of speeches? Pre-game, post-game, pre-practice, post-practice? Like, what kind of speeches does Robbie Caldwell give as the head coach?
Yeah, man. So I love Coach Caldwell, man. He's actually one of the men that I called when I became very interested in becoming a coach. Somebody who I respect immensely. And when he was the associate head coach, if I remember correctly, associate head coach, offensive line coach, before Coach Johnson retired, his role was that of the disciplinarian, right? And that of the guy that you don't want to see if you kind of got into trouble. And that was what everybody really thought about him until he assumed the role of head coach. He couldn't have been more of a player's coach, connected to the inner workings of the day-to-day life of a young man who's a student athlete on that campus, and I just somebody who really cared about the longevity of you as a player, but also your life after football. So he's somebody that I have, again, tremendous amount of respect for him and his wife and his family, and was really good to us as players.
And he went on to be a very good offensive line coach on those really good Clemson teams. And, when you call him and say, hey, coach, I'm thinking about getting into that business, what kind of advice does he give you?
Yeah, it's kind of like the advice I got from everyone. I mean, I call Coach Marve amongst a number of other coaches. And the question you always get is, are you sure you want to do this? Because there are a number of challenges with this profession that most people don't really see, that are behind the curtain, the sacrifices that come with your family, the time allocation that's necessary to be really good at this job if you want to be really good, and the dedication that's necessary in order to see it through. And so that's the first question that you get. And then the second thing that came out of his mouth was a statement, and he said, I always knew you're going to be a coach. You're going to be really good at this. And to get affirmation like that from somebody that saw you as a young man playing football who had no desire whatsoever to get into coaching, for him to immediately say that was certainly affirmation for me to go down this path. And I'm glad that I have.
And you mentioned asking Coach Pry about it, Brent Pry, your current boss at Virginia Tech. At that point, I mean, you're probably not thinking, hey, this guy's going to be the head coach and I'm going to be the DC for him someday. But could you tell, hey, he's keeping an eye on me?
Well, Coach Pry and I have always had a really close relationship. I mean, I was his starting Mike linebacker the year that I was with him. He would have us over to his home all the time and take care of us in terms of meals provided. I had the opportunity to do what do you call those? I forget those meals that you can have.
The occasional meal, I believe, is the NCAA term for it. That's right.
He'd have us over. He'd also have us over on Thanksgiving, take us out. There was an occasion where I actually couldn't make it. I was studying for an exam, and Coach got me a meal and actually brought it to where I was staying that day. So you talk about somebody who has a tremendous amount of investment in his players, who cares about their well-being. And even when I was no longer playing for him, but still living in Nashville, not in coaching yet, he would inquire as to how I was doing, how my fiance, who's my wife now at the time, was doing, and still invite me over to just come fellowship. And I no longer played another snap for him. So you talk about somebody who's extremely invested and interested in you. I mean, so that just goes to say who he is now as a leader of our program, as a head coach, if that's who he was as a position coach. So, man, we're lucky and thankful.
How excited are you to get this thing kicked off? You got a team that, I talked to other people in the ACC. They're scared of you / excited about what you can be. You've seen it from the inside. How excited are you for this season?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man. A lot of people outside looking in look at look at what we do for a living, coaching football. Working almost incessantly, year round, 24, 365 for 12 guaranteed opportunities, and just don't understand it. But man, we love what we do. We're really excited about this first game. We've been banging and in camp for the last month or so, and we're ready to suit it up and go have the opportunity to play against another opponent. And so, man, that's all we're focused on right now. I can't tell you anything about the season. I couldn't tell you who we play. I don't know. All I know is this week that we're laser focused on what the opportunity we have in front of us, and we'll talk about the next one when it comes.
Coach Marve heading back to Nashville to face the alma mater. Good luck.
Hey, thanks, Andy. Good talking with you.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.